The morning started like every other weekday morning for Daniel. The alarm buzzed faintly at 5:45, and his tired hand reached over to silence it before it could wake his daughter. The sun hadn't even begun to creep past the gray skyline, and the faint hum of city life was still a few hours away. He sat there on the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing his face, breathing slowly. Another day, another commute, another long shift, yet somewhere in the exhaustion, there was purpose. The small, soft sound of his daughter's steady breathing from the next room reminded him of that. He got up quietly, tiptoeing down the hall. The walls of the tiny apartment were filled with childish crayon art, rainbows, stars, a stick figure family of 3 with the words, me, mommy, and daddy. That third figure still hurt to look at, but Daniel never took the drawings down. He'd lost his wife, Melissa, in a car accident 3 years ago. Since then, everything he did, every lunch packed, every bedtime story told, every morning coffee gulped down in a rush, was for the daughter, Emma. She was 6 now, bright and curious, her laughter a reminder that love still existed even after tragedy. He opened the refrigerator, half empty as usual, and grabbed milk for Emma's cereal. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, the kind of sound that filled silence when a home had lost one of its voices. Daniel poured the milk, cut up a banana, and smiled when he heard small footsteps padding toward the kitchen. "Daddy," Emma mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was messy, her pajamas too big, and her voice still thick with sleep. "Good morning, sunshine," Daniel said softly. "Breakfast's ready." She climbed into her chair and started eating, swinging her legs under the table. "Are you going to work again today?" she asked with the blunt honesty only a child could have. He smiled faintly. "You know I have too. Gotta make sure we can buy more of that cereal you love so much. But I don't like when you're gone all day." His heart twisted a little. "I don't like it either," he said. "But I'll be home tonight, and maybe we can watch that movie again. The one with the talking dog." Her face lit up. Promise, promise. That promise was what kept him moving most days. He dropped her off at school around 7:15. Making sure her backpack was zipped and her hair was tied back. She waved at him from the gate, shouting, "Bye, Daddy," before disappearing into the crowd of children. Daniel checked his watch. The 7:45 train to Manhattan was his daily ride. He took the same seat every morning, third car, near the left door, where he could rest his head against the window and think. Think about work, about Emma's future, about how strange it felt to live a life that always felt like something was missing. The train that morning was unusually crowded. He squeezed into his seat and adjusted his backpack beside him. A middle-aged man next to him scrolled through his phone. A young couple whispered quietly. A woman in a red coat sipped her coffee and stared blankly ahead. The rhythmic rumble of the train was oddly comforting, a reminder that despite everything, life kept moving. Daniel pulled out his wallet and looked at the worn photo inside. It was the last family picture they'd taken. Melissa's arm around him, Emma sitting on his lap, all of them smiling. He rubbed his thumb over Melissa's face gently. "You'd be proud of her," he whispered under his breath. The train screeched through the tunnels, dim lights flickering overhead. Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the rocking motion lull him. That's when he heard it. A soft, uneasy voice cutting through the low hum of the train. "Please, stop." I said no. His eyes snapped open. At first, he wasn't sure where it came from. Then he saw her, a young woman, maybe early 20s, seated 3 rows away. She was pressed against the window, trying to make herself smaller. A man in a gray hoodie stood over her, leaning far too close. He whispered something in her ear that made her flinch. Her hands clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles pale. Daniel's gut tightened. He looked around. Everyone else saw it. The people sitting across from her, the man with the phone, even the woman in the red coat, but no one moved. No one said a word. It was that same eerie silence that always followed public cruelty. The kind where people convince themselves it's not their problem. Stop touching me, the woman said again, louder this time. The man in the hoodie laughed under his breath. Relax, I'm just talking to you. Daniel's pulse began to thud in his ears. He'd seen this before. The bystander effect, the moral freeze that made good people stay quiet. But all he could think of was Emma. What if this was her, years from now? What if someone looked away while she was scared and trapped? He stood up. Hey, he said, his voice carrying across the car. She told you to back off. The man turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing. Who the hell are you, old man? Mind your business. Daniel's heart was pounding, but his voice stayed calm. I just made it my business. Some passengers looked up now, some lowered the gaze again. The tension grew like static in the air. The man straightened, his expression darkening. You don't know who you're talking to. Doesn't matter, Daniel said, stepping closer. You're done talking to her. The woman looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Daniel positioned himself between her and the man, his body a wall of quiet defiance. Move, the man said, voice rising. You think you're some kind of hero. Daniel didn't answer. He could feel every muscle in his body tighten, his senses sharpened. The train lurched slightly as it approached the next station. The man shoved him hard. Daniel stumbled back, hitting the pole, but he steadied himself immediately. He'd worked construction for years before switching to maintenance. His body was built on labor and long days. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't afraid of one either. Get off the train, Daniel said evenly. Now, the man sneered, glancing around the carriage. For the first time, he noticed everyone staring. The same people who had been silent were now watching, judgment clear in their eyes. Some even lifted their phones, recording. You people are pathetic, the man muttered, backing toward the door as it opened. He spat on the floor before stepping out. As the doors slid shut, a collective breath seemed to fill the air, relief mixed with guilt. The woman buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Daniel crouched down slightly so he could meet her eyes. Hey, are you hurt? She shook her head, still trembling. No, I didn't think anyone would help. You shouldn't have to think that, he said gently. You did nothing wrong. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, gave a faint smile, and returned to his seat. The rest of the passengers avoided his eyes, but the silence now felt different, less like indifference, more like shame. The young woman sat near him after that, clutching her bag as if it were armor. I'm Lena, she said quietly after a while. Daniel, he replied. They spoke softly as the train rolled on. She told him she was a college student interning at a law firm downtown. She'd noticed that man for days, sometimes in the same car, sometimes on the platform, always staring. Today he'd followed her onto the train. Daniel listened without interrupting. He didn't offer empty advice or cliches, he just listened. The more she spoke, the more his protective instinct burned. I didn't know what to do, Lena said. Everyone looked away. It was like I wasn't even there. Daniel looked out the window, the dark tunnels flashing by. People are scared, he said finally. They think if they ignore something, it'll disappear. But fear's not an excuse. She stared at him, her expression softening. Why did you step in? He hesitated for a moment. Because I'd want someone to do the same for my daughter someday. Her eyes glistened. She smiled faintly, the first real smile since it happened. She's lucky to have you. Daniel smiled back. I'm the lucky one. When the train reached Lena's stop, she stood and looked at him one last time. You didn't just stop him, she said. You reminded me that people still care. She got off, disappearing into the crowd, and Daniel sat back in silence. He felt an odd calm settle over him. Not pride, not adrenaline, just quiet peace. That evening, when he got home, Emma came running, shouting, Daddy. Like she always did. He caught her mid-air, spinning her around until she giggled. You're late, she pouted. The train was crazy today, he said with a laugh. She didn't notice the hint of exhaustion behind his voice. He didn't tell her what happened. He didn't want to fill her small world with fear. Instead, he helped her with homework, made dinner, and tucked her into bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit. After she fell asleep, Daniel sat on the couch, the city lights spilling in through the blinds. He thought about Lena, about how fragile the world could be for women like her, for anyone who didn't have someone to step up. He thought about Emma growing up, riding her own train one day. He prayed the world would be kinder to her. But if it wasn't, he hoped she'd meet someone who wouldn't think twice about standing up for what's right. The next few days came and went, and the routine resumed. Then, one morning, as he boarded the same train, he saw Lena again. She smiled when she spotted him and made her way over. "Hey," she said, a small bag in her hands. "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a folded piece of paper, a drawing. Two stick figures stood on a subway platform. One labeled, "Hero," the other, "Girl." Above them were the words written in blue crayon, "Good people still exist." Daniel stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. "Thank you," he said softly. "It's from me and my little sister," Lena said. "She drew it after I told her about you." He smiled. "Tell her she's a great artist." They shared a quiet laugh as the train moved. Neither said it, but both knew that one moment of courage had changed something deep inside them. Sometimes heroes aren't born in headlines or uniforms. Sometimes, they're just tired single dads on their way to work, men who carry their pain quietly but still find the strength to protect someone else. And as the train sped through the tunnels, Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like life was just routine. He felt proud, whole, human. He didn't do it for thanks, or recognition, or to prove a point. He did it because when the world goes quiet, someone has to speak. Because courage doesn't wait for permission. Because kindness, no matter how small, can echo through a lifetime. And for Daniel, that morning on the train wasn't about confrontation or danger. It was about something much simpler.